Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Hannah and Erik Go Birding. We're a couple of bird brains looking for adventure and some birds.
I'm Hannah, and he's Erik.
And we bring you this podcast to share our adventures with you and talk about random thoughts on other birding topics. Just a couple of disclaimers. We're not experts, and if we discuss any controversial material, we hope you keep an open mind. But also remember that what we discuss, it's our own opinions.
In this week's episode, we will be talking about our birding adventure to Orlando Wetlands and a bit about birding at spots that birding is not really one of their primary functions.
Yeah, so do we have any birding news this week? This week?
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff this week. Maine had its first record of a roseate spoonbill, which was discovered in some county that I can't pronounce, by Dan Furbish, and he found it by drive-by birding, which is amazing to spot a first record that way. Hennepin County, that was found by Kevin Smith and then by a couple of other guys. So yeah, they're spreading out. There was also a first hooded oriole in Nova Scotia, and that was found by Alex, Burton, and Kathleen. In Washington, they had a stellar week. They've had a painted redstart, a Tennessee northern wheat ear, which is spread throughout Washington.
That's crazy.
Yeah. A Bermuda petrel was spotted recently by Nick on a NOAA survey on the Gordon Gunter off the continental shelf off of Massachusetts, which would just be amazing to see. Lastly, we wanted to share some podcast news with you all. One of the reasons we started this podcast was because we do a lot of driving. And when we aren't listening to the ABA podcast, Signcast, because we're big Seinfeld fans.
Yeah, big fans.
And also, Wait, Don't Tell Me. We talk. We talk. And I thought that people might enjoy the conversations that we have. Some people may not. But since many of them are birding related, we thought to share them with everybody. Anyways, this week we drove the 4.5 hours down to Orlando from Tallahassee, and we talked about what some big picture things. So that led us to pencil up a purpose, which is the following. Hannah and Erik Go Birding seek to empower future and current birders to appreciate and advocate for the conservation of birds and their habitats through ethical wildlife watching and avatourism. This is a working statement and may change with a direction and a vision for anything we do in the future. And it also tells our listeners what we're really about.
It's kind of a mouthful, though.
This is what I'm used to in organizations. So
yeah,
you have to be very specific. So for this week's adventures, we're talking about our recent trip to the Orlando Wetlands Park. So just a little bit of background on this location. It's primarily a wastewater treatment facility. It was constructed in 1987, and it's a wetland that was used for a regional wastewater facility that was constructed in 1979. And that was constructed to contain available sewer capacity. And these man-made wetlands, that's what's fed by the regional treatment facility.
The wetland property is just over 1,200 acres and was a former pasture. The system was designed to handle 35 million gallons of water a day, and the water is moved through a 4-foot diameter pipeline approximately 17 miles to flow out into the 17 cells in the 3 different wetland communities in an effort to remove any of the residual nutrients that were left over after the wastewater treatment process. The nitrogen and the phosphorus are the main things that they're looking to remove there.
Cool. So the ecological communities that are present: marsh area, mixed marsh and wetland prairie, and hardwood, so cypress swamp. And this promotes plant growth, but it was also planted initially with over 2.3 million aquatic plants, including 200,000 of them, which were trees, to help create the wetlands. Wetlands from the beginning to the end, and its journey takes it through these ecological communities and the different cells due to the gravity flow. So it's a little bit higher on one end, a little bit lower at the bottom. And it leaves the wetland park through a canal and flows into the St. Johns River.
I know wastewater kind of worries some people, but in the past I worked for a little while as a wastewater plant operator, and I can assure you that treating water as a final treatment like this is very safe. The outflow is sampled daily and is reported every month. They have to file a monthly report on everything that happened, everything on all their sample report. On on everything that happened, everything on all their samples. On average, the wetland removes approximately 64% of the total nitrogen and 74% of the total phosphorus, of the initial phosphorus that came in through the influent, through the wetlands. The water that leaves the wetland is typically a higher quality than what's found in the St. Johns River anyways.
So basically what he's saying, for people who don't know anything about wastewater like me, it's really clean water. It's good to be used for drinking water after that point, right?
Yeah, after they would have to draw it off the river and then treat it for drinking water. It's good to eat.
The Orlando Wetlands Park was open seasonally for public use in the 1990s, but now it's open year-round from sunrise to sunset. And they even host a wetlands festival in February, which sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would probably be really, really fun to go there when it's a little bit cooler.
Yeah, I agree.
A little bit for this visit by following the wetlands, the Orlando Wetlands Photography Facebook group and the Friends group page. We requested some information on there and asked if anybody could give us some ideas of things that we shouldn't miss, things that we should look for while we're there. And the volunteer group, there was a few individuals that were while we're there, and the volunteer group, there was a few individuals that were super knowledgeable and went ahead and just gave us a ton of information. And it was kind of nice to see that there was such a tight-knit group that's heavily involved in this park.
So we showed up at the park just after dawn. We checked out the lay of the land and head onto the trail. In these wetlands, it was just gorgeous. From the trailhead, it doesn't look like a whole lot, but you walk a quarter of a mile down the trail and it opens up into a huge expanse of wetland cells, trees, palms, trails, all that. And it's a gorgeous sight. And as the sun rose over the lake, it was even more beautiful. As I've said in the past, I'm not great at reading maps and translating them into my head. So when we looked at the map, it looked like the big pond had about a mile trail around it. No, it's closer to 7 miles. So we decided to head down it for a little bit, not the whole 7 miles, and then try to make it back in time for the
Yeah, so right off the bat when we got there was birds pretty much everywhere. Right inside the gate, there was white ibis right there. We were hearing black-bellied whistling ducks flying over. We saw a bunch of herons and egrets and vultures all around within minutes of getting there. There was a bunch of flooded-out palm trees that serve as woodpeckers, and really, black-bellied whistling ducks were everywhere there. It was a paradise for them.
And on the other side of the trail, from where all that was, there was a bit of a forest, and we were able to knock off a few forest species like red-bellied woodpeckers, vireos, wrens, and other passerines.
Yeah, but pretty much the super exciting thing for me is at the point where we were about to turn around, we saw up in the top of one of the palms a pileated woodpecker, my favorite bird out of all the birds. All the birds I've seen so far. It was just hanging out on the side of a palm tree. It was about 800 feet away, and I have really terrible photography skills. And our camera's not the best, so I was not able to get any worthwhile shots of it, unfortunately.
But we still experienced
the woodpecker, yeah.
We breathed the same air. We decided to start heading back towards the front so we didn't miss the tram. And on the way back, there were kingfishers flying about, which is the first for the season. So that was pretty exciting to watch them.
Oh yeah, it's getting to be that time of the year.
Yeah. Anyways, while watching the woodpeckers and blackbellies, a vehicle that I describe as an extended golf cart pulled alongside us. And for the first time since this podcast, we were noticed by someone.
He was the volunteer that had corresponded with us on Facebook the most, I think.
Yeah, so he and Bob, another volunteer, were cruising the trails looking for birds. They urged us to hop on because there was a barred owl that was seen in a small stand of trees nearby. Hanging out these guys, it was like cruising on a Saturday afternoon with your buddies. They were giving each other crap and really just seemed to be enjoying the day out at the wetlands.
Oh yeah, they really like it out there.
Yeah. We hopped on and we were off to see the owl.
Yeah, well, we didn't see the owl, unfortunately. It must have gotten Nancy. Yeah, well, we didn't see the owl, unfortunately. It must have got Nancy waiting for us. So we sat there, talked about where the owl was for a little bit, looked at some of the pictures that Bob had, and then Jim turned the cart around and we headed back to the nature center to see if anyone else is going to join up for the tram tour.
system and wetland work together in the history of the landscape. They have some great models that were created that just give you a great look at how everything really works. It was a great way to start off the tour and have a better understanding of what we were to see.
Yeah, so once we finished up inside the nature center with Jim showing all those to where the water flows basically into one of the first cells where the vegetation was the thickest, and that's where we saw our first pig frog, which we'd been hearing them for a while and kind of thought they were bullfrogs, but I guess bullfrogs and pig frogs pretty similar in sound.
Yeah, we learned something new.
Yeah.
New.
Yeah.
Jim took us to some of the highlight spots around the park. We saw lots of baby gallinules, juvenile herons, and more. There's actually a rookery on an island in the middle of the lake. It's the big island on the east side, but there's no way to access it to see a whole lot without a really good scope, which none of us had. But Jim was telling us about a proposed boardwalk that will eventually pass near it. Apparently they were going to put it right next to it.
They're going to put it through it, I think, is what the initial,
is that what it was?
Yeah, initial plans that he had talked about, but they decided against going through it, luckily.
Yeah, I think right alongside it would be a fantastic view.
Yeah.
I talked to Jim about life, retirement, photography, and he's an extremely talented photographer that regularly posts his sightings and his pictures to the Orlando Wetlands Facebook page, so you should definitely check it out. He really got into the park and photography after his retirement, and you can tell that he just loves giving these tours and being out on the trail.
Oh yeah, he was
tours and being out on the trail.
Oh yeah, he was having a blast, showing us around one of his favorite places, I guess.
Yeah, and it's so much fun to hang out with people like that because you really get into it too and start to love it when you see somebody else love it.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we got about I guess it was about the halfway point of the tour. And there was a family that was hot and tired and didn't want to walk anymore, so they hopped on the tram to join us. They weren't much into birds, but Jim knew just the thing for that. There was an alligator nest that he knew about that was a little further out on the trail. So we drove out there to take a look at that. The mama gator was just in the bush. I think she was about a 6 foot long gator. And before she got too agitated, we left. But everyone there got a bunch of little photos of it and got to see the nest. And he explained about how long the nesting process takes and all that.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable in that.
Oh yeah.
And on the way back to the nature center, Jim decided to show. Jim decided that instead of just talking about the demucking project they have going on, he could show us a little bit about the process, because we all know that Erik would be super interested in that sort of thing as a former wastewater technician.
Yeah.
And he knew that the crew wasn't really working.
Yeah.
He knew that the crew wasn't really working that much that day, so he decided to swing past and show us.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't mention it at all, but they are doing some maintenance in the park, a process that they call demucking. I think not just they call it, I think it's just called demucking.
That's the word.
Well, they use heavy equipment to remove the settled debris and vegetation, which in this case is about 6 feet. That is settled into there, and that settled debris reduces the quality of the wastewater that's being treated. So it doesn't treat it as well as it should get treated. So this is kind of a maintenance task that needs to be done at wastewater treatment wetlands like this. Since the park is first and foremost a last step wastewater treatment facility, the quality of the effluent is the number one priority. So even if it disturbs the wildlife, these processes have to happen. The demucking process looks pretty terrible for the wildlife. They have to go through and basically just tear everything out. So
they
all
just
the vegetation,
dig down like 6 feet, right?
Yeah, they dig down 6 feet. They pile all that dirt into piles, or all that muck and mud into piles to let it dry out, and they haul it off once it's a little dry, so they don't have to carry the weight of the water while they're hauling it. That seems pretty
simple.
Yeah, it seems like it's a simple process, but it's
it's
time intensive and it looks very destructive. but it's something that the wetlands recover real quick, especially since it's completely surrounded on all sides by all the native vegetation, and the birds are right there. They just have to finish what they're doing and get the equipment out of there, and then the birds will be right back.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to see what it looks like once it's again.
Yeah.
So the cell they were working on, like he said, had about 6 feet of muck and old vegetation, and they were getting all that out. It looks like it's a big project. But Erik is essentially a child, so we were rounding the corner watching the tractor fill up a dump truck, and I could tell Erik wasn't even looking for birds at that point. There were like cool things all over the place, little baby gallinules, and Erik's looking at the tractor.
Yeah, well, running an excavator is a lot of fun, and this guy's excavator was huge. It looked like it would be a ton of fun.
So you just want to play with big toys?
Yeah, it would have been a lot.
Anyways, from this whole experience, I think we need to give huge props to Jim and Bob. These guys were very professional, knowledgeable, friendly, and perfect hosts. We were blessed to have such great guides. And one of the things I did want to mention that we were able to experience at the site was being in the city and hearing all the city noises, that it was fantastic to hear nothing. Well, until the cicadas woke up for the day. I really only noticed it when Erik was trying to take a sound recording for the podcast, which you guys heard at the beginning of the podcast, and a bumblebee flew past my face, and all I heard was a little bumbling from him, and I didn't hear any cars, any planes, anything else. The sounds of nature are really one of my favorite things to experience that we don't get to experience too often. And I really used to be into this app. It's called Record the Earth, which you can assist scientists by taking short recordings and identify what you heard in those recordings to help create the world soundscape. Not only are these silent moments important for us so we can reconnect with nature, but also for wildlife. Think about a chickadee in a mixed flock. They have to be able to listen to other animals in case of danger. If planes overhead or cars overwhelm the soundscape, it could be an unnecessary difference between life and death for these birds.
Yeah, it's really important. And part of being able to listen to everything around you is, I guess, birding by ear is something that you can't always see the birds. So birding by ear is something that we do a lot of, just listening for bird calls. And at any moment you hear all sorts of things. You hear the cicadas, mostly down here in the south, cicadas like crazy. You'd hear the herons with their gargly hops, whatever you want to call their sound that they make, the growls, the chickadees, the woodpeckers, and the frogs. There's just so many different sounds out there that you can't always hear over cars. But when you get out into some place that's more natural, it's suddenly so loud with just nature sounds.
Yeah, and it can definitely be overwhelming for people if you hear way too much at once, to be able to pinpoint a specific sound. But the best way to get started in birding by ear is to go outside for a few minutes and just listen. Start racking up the sounds that are familiar with you. If you know what a cardinal sounds like or a crow, start listening for those. And once you have that down pat, start ignoring that for the other things that you might not recognize.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned, like when we first started, like really trying to bird by ear, and I can't remember who I heard it from, but what you want to do is you want to be able to see whatever it is making the sound, and that can really solidify it in your mind. So if it's a frog making the sound, if you watch the frog make the sound, if it's a red-bellied woodpecker, if you watch the red-bellied woodpecker make that sound, it really solidifies, so you can associate it with the visual of what it is with the sound of what it is.
And I prefer using mnemonic devices. These are technique. Towhees, Eastern towhees, they say drink your tea. And I just remember that. And so every time I hear tea, I'll, instantly remember it's an Eastern towhee.
Yeah, to drink your towhee tea.
Drink your towhee tea.
And since starting this podcast, and then last year when I met Nathan Pipolo, who wrote a
book all about this stuff.
A book all about birding by ear and birding sounds. I've really started to appreciate spectrograms, and those are visual representations of the spectrum of the frequencies of sound. And they're also called sounds, and figure out a lot just by looking at them and becoming familiar with the shapes that different sounds make on a spectrogram.
But getting back to soundscapes, which is a sound or combination of sounds that forms and arises from an immersive environment. And this can include things like animal sounds, weather, and...
Sounds can result in noise pollution. A perfect example of this is the use of sonar in the oceans and how that can confuse and harm whales and dolphins. Just, it's so loud.
Yeah, it's too much noise.
Yeah. The U.S. National Park Service is actively working to protect soundscapes and acoustic environments in our national parks. The National Park Service feels that the character and quality of the soundscape influence human perceptions of an area. So you're going to think differently if you hear things differently, like when you're in an area. And providing a sense of place that differentiates it from other regions is an important thing.
Yeah, so every place has its own sound. So I encourage you to get outside and take a few minutes to enjoy your soundscape, because all sounds are unique and they occur at one place at one time and can't be replicated the exact same way. And if you want to contribute to the citizen science component of this, download Record the Earth and get started.
Yeah, and so since we've been created for the purposes of bird watching, it kind of made us start thinking about what other locations that you bird at, but birding wasn't the reason that the place was built.
It's more of like a secondary purpose, or even tertiary.
Yeah, just second, third, fourth, fifth reason for a purpose existing. So Nicholas Lund of the Birdist Rules says, birders are probably the only people begging to get access to a wastewater treatment plant. We go to landfills, we go to graveyards, we go to backyards, we go to military bases, we go to industrial buildings. We see snowy owls at airports. Birds don't have maps. And they just go wherever the heck they want to. Birds don't have maps, and they just go wherever the heck they want to. If the habitat's there, they're going.
So this is what we talked about in our car ride. A lot about alternative birding places is what I'm calling them, or unusual birding or weird birding, whatever. So we thought of our own examples of these locations, but I was curious. to see what else there was out there. So I posed the question on a Facebook group that I follow called World Girl Birders. And if you haven't checked it out, do so. It's great group of people, and had a huge response. Facebookers listed the following sites that have been intention.
Yeah, wastewater plants, like the one that we visited, were mentioned by Lindsay, specifically Hornsby Bend in Travis County, Texas. Sherry, Carol, and Nancy mentioned those too. Judy suggested a wastewater pond in Lakeview, Oregon, where she's seen a Bonaparte skull.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Named cemeteries.
Yeah, we birded a cemetery once. I guess we birded a couple times, but the one main time I can think of is over there in Houston. We were looking for a great peewee that had been spotted, and it just felt uncomfortable and disrespectful to be walking around with binoculars.
Yeah, it did. There was a funeral going on.
Yeah.
There was a funeral going on.
Yeah. But Crystal on the Facebook page, she commented that she had gotten permission from the widow to bird during a funeral, or to bring binoculars during a funeral. Apparently the deceased would have wanted it this way.
Well, that's nice, respecting their wishes. While watching house hunters and golf tournaments, which I really started to do birding while watching TV, which has got to be like the laziest way to bird. I noticed in Anne with an E, which is on Netflix. It's a really good show. They oversaturated the show with downy woodpecker calls. You walked in when I was watching an episode.
Yeah.
It was like every 30 seconds there was a downy call.
Yeah. I've seen, I don't remember where it was that I saw it, but somebody on Facebook recently was talking about just inappropriate calls for habitats.
Yeah.
That it would be like a downy woodpecker, and they're in the middle of the desert, or it would be like a loon and they're just not even in the middle of the desert, or it would be like a loon and they're just not even in the right side of the country for that type of loon.
Just like your favorite scientist, what's his name?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, and the whole Titanic thing.
Yeah, the Titanic and the star maps are all wrong. It's because you know when it sank, you know the hemisphere, so what the stars should look like, and they were wrong in the movie Titanic.
I'd say let's like call out every single movie, but I think that was kind of done with the red-tailed hawk call and the bald eagle. I feel like it's been done.
It's been done.
But maybe somebody could do that.
And so other places that some people have mentioned, Reba, Patty, Nancy, and Judy, they all mentioned landfills. The Tamaulipas crow for its return to the United States.
I know.
Return to the ABA.
Like, what? like 8 years or something since it had been seen there.
Yeah, had basically been extirpated, or thought to be completely extirpated, and now all of a sudden back.
Stroke of luck.
Back at the Brownsville dump during the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival.
I know, it's amazing.
And the Chihuahua and Ray Valley specialty, pretty much.
But it's an easy bird to see there at the dump.
It's an easy at the dump, yeah. And that dump was actually, it was made famous, famouser, in the movie The Big Year.
Everyone's favorite movie.
Yeah, every birder's favorite movie.
Yeah, we saw it opening night.
Yeah,
favorite movie.
Yeah, every birder's favorite movie.
Yeah, we saw it opening night.
Yeah, we did see it opening night.
We were the only ones there.
That was pretty much empty, weirdly.
Amy suggested trailer parks, and she mentioned Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park, which is now a birding haven, but it started off as a campground. So it's a big hotspot for birding, but it originally did start off as a campground. Last year, when we were down at the Rio Grande Valley Festival, we got an alert on the way home back to Houston that someone had seen a long-tailed duck not far from our route, which just happened to be at a small pond in a trailer park. So don't overlook the trailer parks. Small pond in a trailer park. So don't overlook the trailer parks.
And Angel commented about a subdivision flattened by a hurricane, like the Baytown Nature Center in Houston. Well, this is now a managed nature center. It wasn't initially built as a nature center area. It was just a subdivision, and then it got as a nature center area. It was just a subdivision, and then it got just flattened and destroyed. And instead of rebuilding, because it was now in definitely a floodplain area, they just decided to make it a nature area.
Works out.
Yeah.
Laura said rest stops, like the painted bunting at the Falfurus rest stop. This gives drivers an opportunity to get out of the car, stretch your legs, but it also gives migrating birds a stopover spot and sometimes rarities like redstarts. And that gives them a little oasis to hang out in the middle of what's basically a desert. So that's made for people to stop, but it happens
bird
to be a good bird stop too.
Yeah, we visited some burned areas back when we were in Oregon. We went on a woodpecker hike or a woodpecker drive through up and down a bunch of logging roads. We went to a couple parks too while we were out there, but we saw quite a few huge variety of woodpecker species.
Yeah, what'd we have, like 11 woodpeckers?
Woodpecker species.
Yeah, what'd we have, like 11 woodpeckers that day?
Yeah, it was. I think there's 13 there, and we only had 11 of them, so it was close.
Yeah, and if you haven't been to the Oregon Woodpecker Festival, that does that same route, and it was pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Ava mentioned that she likes to watch birds while she's stuck in traffic. Checking out the ephemeral ponds in Northern California. We're used to people fishing in those stormwater ponds in Houston, which is just weird.
Yeah.
But there was one near our apartment when we were in Houston that had ducks in it pretty frequently.
Yeah, we should step by. It sounds like she had a possible awkward birding experience at a nude beach in a national park. So just be aware of where your binoculars are pointed.
Yeah. Be careful where you point them.
Yep.
Laura spotted a peregrine falcon over Wrigley Field, which is a pretty good spot to see. Birds just in general. You have a big open roof to look through, kind of to funnel your vision up that way.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that guy, the pitch hit a bird and it's like a foof, hit a bird and it's like a foof.
Yeah, that was pretty horrific to see on national television.
It was weird.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Nancy commented with a Swift watch at an abandoned mattress factory. And do you remember when we went to the Chapman Elementary? That was pretty miraculous.
Yeah, that was impressive. It was like this huge funnel of Vox's Swifts just coming in right at sunset, and we were hoping to see like some peregrines or some red tails or something, trying to get them, but we didn't see any. No predators that night. Nah.
But what about the purple martins roosting at that shopping complex just south of Houston?
Oh yeah, it was pretty much the same thing. It was crazy. It was like we're there one minute, there's nothing, handful, 20, 30 grackles just hanging out in the parking lot, and then all of a sudden just they start flowing in. It's just like this river of purple martins just flying in. And we're standing right in the parking lot of a shop.
Instances, the local Audubon chapters, they hosted watching parties because it's such a rare, or it's such an unusual occurrence to be in the middle of a city or in the middle of wherever these birds decide to take the opportunity to roost for the night. And so the bird watchers follow them. It's pretty cool.
And I guess some and a lot of these locations is pretty well known where they're at, because the birds know exactly where they're going, how far they can fly each day, and so they end up in the same place all the time. Debbie mentioned an army base, which I guess that's kind of odd, going to an army base to bird. But Lindsay said that Fort Hood was one of the best places she's ever birded.
Gotta give that a try sometime.
Yeah, I guess so.
Ollie somehow found pigeons at 80 meters below the Earth's surface in a mine. Well, that is certainly unique.
Yeah. That's crazy. Pigeons, they're everywhere, I guess.
Yeah, everywhere.
They made it everywhere.
We'll see them in space soon.
Yeah, we'll be up on the moon. They made it everywhere.
We'll see them in space soon.
Yeah, we'll be up on the moon.
Pigeon fly fast.
Pigeon will fly fast on the moon. That's ridiculous. So, another one, Cynthia, she was birding at some fly ash ponds, which I guess that'd be pretty hazardous.
Yeah, I
for
think you'd want
birds
to wear
and
a
people.
dust mask or something.
Yeah.
Cheryl birded around a couple of super fun hazardous waste sites, which sounds kind of scary. I might consider
there too.
Yeah, I might consider like a trip to Chernobyl.
Yeah. Carol mentioned an odd trip to a homeless camp on Oahu, but I guess she didn't see any birds while she was there.
Probably saw something else then.
I guess.
Ma birds pocket parks in New York City that are block-sized lots that are set up as little parks. Which a sod farm, which a couple of people mentioned. That's where we saw our Life for American Golden Plover, just northeast of Houston. So sod farms, regular farms, dairies, these are all great spots to see birds too, especially cowbirds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, lots of cowbirds.
To see birds too, especially cowbirds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, lots of cowbirds. So I guess the one that wins the comment contest, or if you want to call it a contest.
I like that.
I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Dragon. Sorry, he commented with an article that he wrote about a trip to India where they went to a cattle carcass dumping ground, and they were looking for some vultures. So we'll leave a link to his article in the show notes. But it was a pretty interesting read.
It's very graphic.
Yeah, I guess graphic,
the language. I mean, it's not like the pictures.
I guess
language. I mean, it's not like the pictures are super graphic.
No,
it's
they
just
weren't
a lot of dead cows.
Yeah.
But just from the words, I could smell it.
Yeah.
I was immersed in the experience. So thank you for that. Before I ate dinner. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone that commented on the post. It's really interesting to see Thanks to everyone that commented on the post. It's really interesting to see the different and unusual places that you all have birded.
Pretty much all of those places weren't created for the purpose of wildlife viewing. They had some other purpose in mind, and wildlife just shows up. Because if you build it, they will come. And some of the places like sod farms, they're great places for shorebirds. It's real short grass. They keep it short for the sod. Mm-hmm. The shorebirds love that. And the landfills that, like Brownsville and some of the other landfills that people mentioned, great places to find gulls. You want to find a gull. If you want to try to find a rare, you'll probably end up finding something exciting. Hopefully.
So something important to remember if you choose to go birding in a non-traditional birding location is that you're a visitor there. There may be heavy equipment or hazardous conditions that force you to leave or to be restricted to a certain viewing area from a greater to be, but always read the rules and follow the signs.
Yeah, and we've pretty much every non-traditional birding spot that we've ever been to, they were happy to welcome birders. As long as we let them know that we're there and what we were doing. That way we didn't confuse anyone or we're parked in someplace that we shouldn't be. Because a lot of times if you talk to like at the landfill, you talk to them at the front desk.
They were happy to let us in.
At Brownsville,
Those guys were awesome. They were like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of birders already up there. You'll see them.
yeah, so they were super excited to see us there, but like most of the places they're at least open to who doesn't want someone more excited about their property. Like that seems to be a pretty common thread. Places, but a lot of these places are also private property, like trailer parks. So that's definitely someplace you want to talk to the owner of the trailer park or the property owner or someone in the office before just kind of walking around with binoculars. Yeah, before just kind of walking around with binoculars. Yeah, I think that would probably get the wrong idea in people's heads with you walking around binoculars through a trailer park.
It's like when we saw the burrowing owls, we had people stopping and asking us what we were doing.
Yeah.
But also like the collared plover that came up in the Rio Grande Valley. It was in a cotton field and the guy wanted to spray his field or prep his field for the harvest, and birders were not following his requests. So please just make sure, like Eric said and I said, follow the rules, read the signs, make sure everyone is happy to have you. And oftentimes people are really excited to be out at that place. So it's an exciting event for everybody.
Oh yeah, especially when there's like a rare bird or something there, because even the non-birders that happen to be at the location will get super excited because the mood. Everyone's excited. Everyone's binoculars are swinging back and forth as they're trying to find it. Everyone's abuzz with activity, trying to see it, and even non-birders hand them a pair of binoculars and say, "Hey, take a look at this." They'll get pretty excited about it. So that's exciting. And just by visiting these places, not just when there's rare birds, but just in general, visiting these places gives them more value. By engaging with different people, and both of us we're huge on tourism. Different people, and we're huge on tourism. With birders visiting these locations that aren't true birding parks, it makes the community really bigger, I guess, at these places. The average person wouldn't really want a wastewater treatment facility next to like a wetland that happens to be treating wastewater. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't, it's all about words too. If you called a wastewater treatment plant, maybe some people would be hesitant about it, but you call it a wetland, and
you call it Orlando Wetlands Park, and now you want to live right next to it.
I want a house next to it. In our show notes, we will include the checklist, Record the Earth, and a couple other articles we found about non-traditional birding locations. Anyways, get out there and bird traditional and non-traditional spots. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Music, and anywhere else you listen to us. If you'd like to connect with us, please follow us at Hannah Goes Birding on Instagram, on our Facebook page, Hannah and Eric Go Birding, or email us at hannahhandericgobirding@gmail.com. Tell us what you hated and what you liked. So please share with your friends and